The thunder rolled across the English countryside like an angry drum, rattling windows and sending nervous shivers down the spines of those awake to hear it. But at Highthorn Estate, an expansive Georgian manor perched on a hill overlooking the sleepy village of Weatherfield, one man, it seemed, slept through the storm entirely, or so everyone believed. At precisely 1:17 a.m., a bolt of lightning tore open the sky and struck the ancient elm tree beside the west wing of the house. The crack was tremendous. Villagers later swore it sounded like a cannon fired at close range. Lights flickered across the estate. Dogs barked, servants stirred, and curtains twitched in every window. The entire house seemed to jolt awake, except for Mr. Alistair Remington, the wealthy industrialist whose fortune was matched only by the number of enemies he'd made acquiring it. At 7:36 a.m., when the storm had finally relented and the estate was bathed in a pale, apologetic sunlight, Alistair Remington was found dead in his bed, his expression strangely peaceful, his right hand resting on his chest as if in sleep. But the tranquility of the scene betrayed a darker truth. The man had been murdered. And murdered, the doctor insisted, sometime between midnight and 2, precisely during the thunderstorm he supposedly slept through. What truly startled the household wasn't the death itself. Remington had been a man embroiled in furious business rivalries and bitter personal conflicts, but the eerie detail that not a single person had heard anything unusual from his room. No struggle, no cry, no sign of intrusion. "Quite impossible," murmured Lady Eleanor Remington, his poised and sharp-eyed second wife, as she sat trembling in the morning room. Alistair was a heavy snorer. You could hear him through walls. Yet last night, nothing. She hugged a silk shawl around her shoulders, though the fire was lit and blazing. The storm woke us all. How could he sleep so soundly through thunder? It was a question no one in the household could answer. And so, at the urging of a mutual friend, and out of fear that the local constabulary would draw their own hasty conclusions, Lady Remington sent a telegram to a certain celebrated Belgian detective who had recently taken a cottage nearby to enjoy what he called the excellent English air, so conducive to the exercise of the little grey cells. Thus, by late morning, Hercule Poirot arrived at Highthorn Estate, stepping out of the motor car with his usual unruffled elegance. Despite the mud still slick on the drive from last night's storm, his patent leather shoes gleamed as if polished by sunlight. His mustaches bristled proudly, curving upward like two tiny scimitars, while his eyes glittered with curiosity. "Mes amis," he announced to the sombre group gathered in the grand foyer, "you have done well to call upon Hercule Poirot. Murder is a storm of its own, yes? And one must not wait for its lightning to strike again." The first person to approach him was Inspector Hargreaves of the Weatherfield Constabulary, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a face carved in permanent impatience. "Morning, Monsieur Poirot," he said with a curt nod. "Straightforward enough case, if you ask me. Remington was poisoned, probably slipped into his nightcap." Poirot raised a finger. "Straightforward. Ah, Inspector, how interesting that you use this word on a morning filled with so many curious angles." He gave a soft, almost mischievous smile. "I should like to see the room of the deceased, if you please." The west wing corridor still smelled faintly of burnt wood from the lightning-struck elm. Poirot paused by the window, examining the scorched bark now visible across the lawn. He tapped the sill lightly. "Nature makes much noise when she is in a rage," he murmured. Yet in this house there was silence at the exact moment a man lost his life. Silence can be loud, you understand? One must listen closely to hear what it is telling us. They entered the master bedroom. Alistair Remington lay on the vast four-poster bed, arms gently folded by someone's hand after death. His face was serene, oddly serene, Poirot thought, as though he had accepted his fate the moment it came for him. Nothing appeared disturbed. The bedside lamp still glowed softly. A crystal decanter with a finger of amber liquid stood untouched on the table. A book rested open at his side. Inspector Hargreaves gestured with confidence. "See there? A man asleep, poisoned quietly. No fuss. Must have been the wife, if you ask me." Poirot's eyebrow arched. Ah, the eternal suspicion of the spouse. But the poison, what was it? Something fast-acting. Doctor says a derivative of digitalis. Potent stuff. Poirot leaned closer over the body, but he did not touch. His gaze traveled instead over the man's hands, the sheets, the pillowcase. "Curious," he murmured. "What is?" Hargreaves demanded. Poirot pointed delicately toward the open window. The curtains, though long and heavy, were completely still. "The storm was fierce, was it not?" he asked. "Yet these curtains show no sign of having been stirred by wind. No rain spatter on the sill. No water blown in by the gusts. One would think the window had remained closed." "It surely was," said Hargreaves. "But what of it?" Poirot gestured lightly, his hands tracing invisible arcs. "But the thunder, it was so loud that it woke everyone. Everyone, Inspector, except the man who slept closest to the storm." His eyes sharpened like a needle threading truth. "There is something wrong with this picture, something out of tune." The household gathered again in the morning room. Lady Eleanor, fragile but watchful. Jonas Blythe, Remington's ambitious business partner. Charlotte Blythe, his anxious sister. Graham Huxley, the valet who stood stiff as a lamppost. And Miss Vivian Marlowe, Remington's young secretary, with eyes that darted like startled birds. Poirot observed them each with quiet intensity. "A man dies in a house full of people," he said softly, "and yet not one hears him struggle, not one hears a cry, not one hears a thud. Instead, you tell Poirot that he slept through thunder." His voice lowered. "Or perhaps, mes amis, he was already dead before the thunder began." A ripple of alarm swept the room. Lady Eleanor clutched the shawl around her neck. "Monsieur Poirot, are you saying someone killed him before the storm?" Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "I'm saying, madame, that murder is rarely polite enough to follow the schedule of nature." His gaze flicked briefly toward each suspect. "There is more here than meets the eye. Much more." And so, with thunderclouds still gathering on the horizon and suspicion simmering beneath the polished manners of Highthorn Estate, Hercule Poirot began his investigation. The morning sun clawed its way through the thinning clouds, casting long, uneasy shadows across Highthorn Estate. Though breakfast had been prepared, toast, eggs, kippers, all laid out with impeccable elegance, very little had been touched. A murder creates its own appetite, one usually consisting of fear, suspicion, and whispered conjectures. Poirot entered the breakfast room with his usual precision, wearing a dove-grey suit untouched by the stormy night. His shoes gleamed, his mustache curled perfectly, defying even the faintest tremor of nature. He surveyed the room as though each occupant were a book upon a shelf waiting to be opened. There were 5 suspects present, seating themselves far apart as if fearful that guilt might spread by proximity. She sat at the far end of the table, spine straight, hands wrapped around a porcelain teacup. Her beauty was the elegant, fragile kind, ice over water. Her eyes were clear but rimmed with sleeplessness. She offered Poirot a faint smile. "Monsieur, forgive the disarray. None of us slept." "Understandable, madame," Poirot said gently. "Last night was eventful." She looked away. Wide-shouldered and deep-voiced, Jonas Blythe radiated ambition. His suit was impeccably tailored, yet his tie sat slightly crooked. An unusual flaw, Poirot thought, for a man obsessed with control. "Inspector Hargreaves already questioned us all," Jonas said, irritation leaking into his tone. "I assume, Monsieur Poirot, you're here to do the same." Poirot nodded graciously. "But with a nuance, monsieur. I ask the questions that others do not think to ask, you understand. Jonas muttered, "Must be nice," then reached for his coffee with a hand that trembled just a little. Charlotte Blythe was a small, anxious woman with bird-like movements, forever wringing her hands or adjusting her spectacles. She sat very close to her brother, as though afraid the room itself might swallow her. "A dreadful night," she whispered. "Dreadful. I cannot bear storms. I could hardly breathe." Poirot tilted his head. "But you heard the thunder, mademoiselle?" "Oh, yes," she whispered, "each and every crash." Tall, rigid, wearing his uniform like armor. His posture was immaculate. Yet Poirot noticed the faintest red mark around his collar, as though he had dressed too fast or changed hurriedly. "Monsieur Huxley," Poirot greeted. "Sir," the valet replied with a stiff bow. "You were the last person to see Mr. Remington alive?" "Yes, at 10:30. I brought his nightly tonic. He dismissed me at once." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "His nightly tonic? You mean the glass beside the bed?" "Yes, sir." "Untouched," Poirot murmured. Huxley swallowed once. She was young, stylish, and far too composed for the morning after a murder. Vivienne Marlowe's dark eyes shimmered with intelligence and something else, something carefully concealed. She sipped orange juice with unnatural calm. "Monsieur Poirot, I can provide Mr. Remington's schedule, correspondence, business dealings, anything helpful." Poirot smiled politely. "Ah, you offer much. But for now, I ask for patience, mademoiselle." She nodded, though her fingers tightened subtly around her glass. Poirot positioned himself at the head of the table, claiming the spot Alistair Remington had occupied in life. Symbolic, he thought. Very symbolic. "Mes amis," Poirot began, "before I ask my questions, I must tell you this. I do not believe the murder was committed during the storm." A stunned silence blanketed the room. Jonas snorted. "But the doctor said—" "The doctor estimated," Poirot interrupted softly. "But the body, the room, and the silence of the house say otherwise." Lady Eleanor gripped her teacup harder. Poirot continued, "The storm woke everyone except Mr. Remington. This is unnatural, unless he was already dead before the thunder began. And if he died earlier, then someone among you knew precisely when and how to strike." 5 pairs of eyes darted toward one another. Poirot raised a hand. "Let us begin, yes? With order. Always order." Poirot approached her gently. "Madame, your husband. Did he retire early?" "Yes," she whispered. "Just after 10. He said he had a headache and wished to rest." "And you? Did you hear anything from his room later?" "No, nothing. Not even snoring. That is what unsettles me. Monsieur Poirot. He always snored heavily." Poirot nodded slowly. "Indeed, madame. That is a detail of importance." Her gaze flicked downward, guilt or grief clouding her eyes. "Monsieur Blythe," Poirot began, "you and Mr. Remington were in business together, n'est-ce pas?" "Yes," Jonas answered quickly. "And we had our differences, certainly, but I would never—" "Your disagreements were financial." Jonas winced. He wanted to cut me out of an upcoming contract, a big one. "A motive," Poirot murmured, "but perhaps too obvious." Jonas exhaled sharply. Poirot softened his voice. "Mademoiselle Charlotte, did you leave your room at all during the night?" She shook her head. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I was terrified. I stayed under my blankets listening to that awful storm. Every thunderclap felt like a hammer." Poirot studied her trembling fingers. "But you heard nothing unusual from Mr. Remington's room?" "No, nothing. Isn't that strange?" she whispered. "Very," Poirot said. "Huxley," Poirot said, stepping nearer. "What time did you retire?" "Just before 11, sir, after preparing Mr. Remington for the night." "You sleep in the servants' quarters?" "Yes, sir." "And did the thunder wake you?" Huxley hesitated. Poirot noticed the moment. Small, but telling. "Yes, it did. But you heard nothing else?" No, sir. Nothing. Poirot's eyes lingered a second too long. And you, mademoiselle? Vivienne met his gaze directly. I went to bed at 10:30. I slept badly. The thunder kept me up. And you heard no sound from Mr. Remington's room? No footsteps in the corridor? No, none. Poirot nodded, expression unreadable. He stepped away from the table, placing his fingertips together in a steeple. A house full of people, he said softly. And yet every one of you heard the storm except the man closest to it. His voice lowered. This tells Hercule Poirot something very important. The murderer counted on the storm to disguise the time of death, but the storm began too late. Therefore, the murderer must know precisely when Mr. Remington was last seen alive, and exactly how to keep a man silent. 5 faces stared back at him, pale and tense. Poirot smiled politely. But do not worry, mes amis. Poirot will discover everything. It is only a matter of order in the little grey cells. He left the room, his polished shoes tapping rhythmically on the marble, each step a drumbeat of approaching truth. Hercule Poirot was not a man who hurried, even in a house where murder prowled unseen. His method was to glide, quietly, deliberately, allowing the environment to speak before any human tongue attempted to deceive him. And so, after breakfast and the tense gathering of suspects, he requested only one thing: to walk the house alone, if you please. Inspector Hargreaves grumbled but consented, and the household dispersed in a cloud of anxious whispers. Poirot stepped into the West Wing corridor, hands behind his back, eyes scanning every corner with needle-like precision. The corridor was long, carpeted in deep burgundy, with portraits of Remington ancestors watching him like silent jurors. The morning light seeped through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced, aimlessly. Yet Poirot's attention was fixed on the floorboards. "Never underestimate the floor," he murmured. "It hears more confessions than the priest." He entered Alistair Remington's bedroom again, closing the door gently behind him. Without the inspector's weighty presence or the widow's trembling gaze, the room revealed a different character. Sterile, too tidy, too quiet. Poirot clasped his hands. "Messieurs, mesdames," he said to the empty room, "every murder leaves its pattern. Show me yours." He began his meticulous survey. He observed Remington's posture again, arms folded neatly. A calm expression, sheets unwrinkled. A man poisoned in his sleep. But why tuck him in afterward? Poirot mused. Unless someone wished to stage a scene. His fingers hovered over the pillow, but he still did not touch. Poirot never disturbed a crime scene more than necessary. The pillowcase was smooth. Too smooth. Someone smoothed them, someone with a desire for order or an attempt at it. The glass decanter on the bedside table contained brandy. Poirot smelled it but did not taste. Brandy poured long before bedtime. Untouched. But why? If the poison were in the drink, it would be drunk. He leaned closer to the rim. No scent of tampering, none. The poison did not come by liquid. Poirot paused, but perhaps the poisoner wished the doctor to think so. The curtains remained still, as though they had never known wind. The sill was dry despite the ferocious rain of the night before. Poirot nodded to himself. Remington did not open this window last night. Therefore, the sounds of the storm would have been muffled, yet still audible. The thunder alone should wake him. He frowned. Unless he could not wake. Poirot knelt, eyes sharp. A faint scuff mark near the foot of the bed. A single thread caught on the bedpost, dark, almost black. Not from Remington's pale sleeping attire. Poirot plucked it delicately with tweezers. Someone visited the room. Someone dressed not for bed. He smiled thinly. It is always the small things that betray the large lies. Poirot exited the bedroom and moved to the small service cupboard beside the corridor staircase. A narrow space filled with cleaning supplies, spare linens, and tools. But something struck Poirot at once. A pair of boots on the floor, slightly muddy. Poirot leaned in. "These are the valets, no?" Officer Barnes, hovering nearby, nodded. "Yes, sir. Graham Huxley's." Poirot examined the mud carefully. "This mud is from the storm last night. Fresh. And yet the valet claims he never left the house." Barnes frowned. "Could be from earlier that day." Poirot shook his head. "No. The mud outside is soaked from the storm. The consistency matches only a late-night excursion." He tapped his mustache thoughtfully. "Why would the valet go outdoors in such weather? To fetch something, hide something, communicate with someone. Or perhaps, Poirot thought, to dispose of something." Poirot next visited Lady Eleanor Remington in her private sitting room. She sat by the window, staring out at the shattered elm tree. "Madame?" Poirot greeted gently. She did not turn. "Did you find what you were looking for, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Not yet, but I found what I expected. Inconsistencies." She closed her eyes briefly. "My husband made many enemies. Far more than you can imagine." "Oui, madame. But murder is often committed not by the enemy far away, but by someone near." Lady Eleanor stiffened. Poirot took a seat opposite her. "You did not sleep well last night?" "No, I lay awake." "And you heard nothing from your husband's room?" Her eyes flashed with something, fear, perhaps, or guilt. "No." Poirot studied her face carefully. "You were married only 2 years, madame. Was it a happy marriage?" She hesitated. "Alistair was difficult." "Difficult how?" "He controlled everything. My friends, my travel, my letters. He could be charming to the world, but private life with him was—" She broke off. "You will not use this against me." Poirot placed a hand on his heart. "I use only truth, madame." She exhaled. "We argued last night. At 10, he sent me away. He told me he wanted no disturbance." Poirot nodded. "You see? This is helpful. It gives us a more precise timeline." She swallowed. "You think I killed him?" Poirot softened. "Madame, I think nothing yet. I simply observe." But inwardly, a seed had been planted. Lady Eleanor had argued with her husband, then heard nothing afterward. Too quiet, too convenient. Highthorn Estate was old, older than the quaint village nearby, and old houses, Poirot knew, often hid secrets. He returned to the corridor and examined the wall paneling near Remington's room. A narrow seam in the wood caught his eye, slight but unmistakable. "A panel that moves," Poirot whispered. He pressed gently. Click. The panel opened inward, revealing a narrow passage, dusty but clearly used recently. Poirot smiled. "Ah, now the house speaks." He stepped inside. The passage had footprints, fresh ones, larger men's boots and smaller ones, likely a woman's. A small scrap of fabric hung from a nail. Silk, pale, expensive. Poirot held it up. "Lady Eleanor's, or Miss Marlowe's." He tucked the fabric away. Before leaving the West Wing, Poirot returned to Remington's body. He leaned closer, noticing something he had overlooked. The fingertips. Bluish. Poirot's voice lowered to a whisper. Digitalis would not act so fast as to kill a man within seconds, but something stronger, injected perhaps. Poirot traced the crook of Remington's elbow. A tiny puncture, barely visible. "Voilà," Poirot murmured. The murder was not by ingestion. It was by injection. Quiet, quick, effective. And no one in the house had admitted touching the man after he dismissed his valet. Poirot rose slowly. A man who sleeps through thunder sleeps because he cannot wake, and a man who cannot wake is a man already dying. The puzzle pieces were assembling. He exited the room, calling to Officer Barnes. "Please gather everyone in the drawing room. Monsieur Poirot has questions, very particular questions." And Inspector Hargreaves? Poirot twirled his mustache. Invite him also. It is time he listens and stops jumping to conclusions like a frog in spring. Barnes hurried away. Poirot stood alone in the hall, eyes narrowing. There is a liar in this house, he whispered, and soon Hercule Poirot will know which one. The drawing-room of Highthorn Estate, usually a place for polite conversation and string quartets, now felt heavy with unspoken dread. The curtains had been drawn back to let in the afternoon light, yet the brightness only sharpened the tension etched into the faces of the assembled suspects. Inspector Hargreaves stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, jaw set firmly enough to crack stone. The household gathered in a semicircle like reluctant actors summoned for a tragic play. Lady Eleanor, Jonas Blythe, Charlotte Blythe, Graham Huxley, and Vivian Marlowe all watched Poirot with varying degrees of fear and resentment. Poirot entered last, calm as a priest entering a confessional, and took a seat directly opposite them. He steepled his fingers. Mes amis, before you speak again to Hercule Poirot, you must understand this. I already know someone in this room is lying. A collective shiver passed through the group. Inspector Hargreaves scoffed. Poirot, with respect. Everyone here has been truthful as far as we can tell. Poirot smiled, but it was not a warm smile. Ah, mon ami, you listen to words. Poirot listens to silence. Lady Eleanor, Poirot said, turning to her with an almost tender expression, you told us you argued with your husband shortly before 10. You said he wished no disturbance and retired soon after. She swallowed. Yes, that is correct. Poirot tilted his head. But why is there a scrap of silk, matching the very shade of your evening gown, caught on a hidden passage panel in the west wing? Her face blanched. Jonas Blythe stiffened. Vivian's eyes widened with sudden interest. The widow whispered, A passage? Poirot nodded. Indeed, a secret passage running from the corridor to the old servants' stairs. I found clear footprints, 2 sets, one large, one small. Lady Eleanor shook her head. I swear to you, Monsieur Poirot, I've never used any secret passage. I did not even know one existed. Poirot's eyes studied her trembling hands. Perhaps, but someone took a piece of your dress with them? Inspector Hargreaves straightened. So, you suspect the lady? Poirot raised a finger. No, I suspect the truth is not so simple. Poirot shifted his gaze to Jonas, whose broad shoulders now seemed tight with alarm. Monsieur Blythe, he said smoothly, you claimed you retired early, yet your boots are still damp. Jonas blinked. The storm? Ah, but it was not raining when you entered this room earlier. Therefore, monsieur, your boots became wet recently. After the storm, after the murder. Jonas's face darkened. Are you accusing me of sneaking around outside? Poirot leaned forward. Yes, and I wish to know why. Jonas clenched his fists. Fine. I went outside at dawn. I couldn't sleep. I needed fresh air. Poirot's lips curled. You lie poorly, monsieur. Fresh air at dawn does not explain mud from the west garden, the very area beneath Remington's window. Jonas shot to his feet. That proves nothing. Inspector Hargreaves moved in quickly. Sit down, Blythe. Jonas hesitated, then obeyed, seething. Poirot nodded once. Very good. We continue. Mademoiselle Charlotte, Poirot said more softly, you said you stayed in your room all night, terrified of the thunder. Charlotte twisted a handkerchief, nearly strangling it. Yes, I hardly moved. Poirot lifted his eyebrows gently. And yet your shoes, polished on the soles but dusty on the sides, suggest you walked a place few walk. She gasped. I only stepped into the corridor. I couldn't stay still. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Stepped into the corridor near Mr. Remington's room. She shook her head frantically. No, I never went near him. I was terrified of him in life. I would not go near him in death. Her voice cracked. Tears threatened. Poirot paused. Madame, if you speak truthfully from this moment, you have nothing to fear from Hercule Poirot. She nodded desperately, but Poirot's little grey cells whispered otherwise. Charlotte Blythe knew more than she dared to confess. Poirot now turned to Graham Huxley, who stood as rigidly as if his bones had been carved from oak. Monsieur Huxley, Poirot said quietly, you claim the thunder woke you? Yes, sir. Poirot leaned in. But when thunder awakens a man suddenly, the pulse quickens, the breath sharpens. Yet you claimed you heard nothing else. A curious omission. Huxley stared straight ahead. I speak truth, sir. Poirot nodded. Then why, monsieur, are your boots muddy? From the storm, from last night. Huxley's throat bobbed. I stepped outside after preparing the house. It is nothing. Poirot tapped his mustache. Twice now, 2 men claimed to wander outside in a storm simply for air. Curious, n'est-ce pas? Hargreaves grunted. We'll look into it. Poirot smiled faintly, but his eyes hardened. Monsieur Huxley, I will ask you only once. Did you re-enter Mr. Remington's room after the tonic? No. Too fast. Poirot's silence was damning. Finally, Poirot turned to Vivienne Marlowe, who sat with legs crossed, posture elegant, gaze unflinching. Mademoiselle, Poirot began gently, you are very calm. She lifted a brow. Should I be hysterical, Monsieur Poirot? Non, Poirot replied. But calmness in a storm of fear is interesting. Vivienne remained silent. Poirot continued. You told me you retired at 10:30. Yet in the secret passage I found footprints smaller than the valet's and larger than Lady Eleanor's. Vivienne's lips parted slightly. Are you suggesting I crept through some dusty old tunnel in the middle of the night? Poirot smiled. I'm suggesting nothing yet. I'm merely observing that your perfume, an expensive French blend, lingers faintly in the passage. Jonas glanced at Vivienne sharply. Lady Eleanor flinched. The valet stiffened. Poirot had struck the nerve he aimed for. Vivienne spoke slowly. I did not go near that passage. Anyone could have carried my scent. Poirot nodded gracefully. But mademoiselle, only someone who passed closely by your room would do so. Her jaw tightened. For the first time, Vivienne Marlowe looked afraid. Poirot rose, pacing with slow, deliberate steps. One of you, he said softly, entered Mr. Remington's room before the storm. One of you delivered an injection so quick, so silent, that the victim died without a cry. One of you returned afterward to... He paused. Smooth the sheets. Lady Eleanor gasped. Who would do such a thing? She whispered. Poirot stopped beside the window, hands clasped behind his back. A person who wishes order, he said. A person who cannot bear disorder even in murder. His eyes moved from face to face. You see, mes amis. The killer did not panic. The killer took their time. The killer was calm. Every head turned slowly toward Vivienne Marlowe. She swallowed. Poirot raised a hand. Do not look too quickly. Calmness can be an act. Lies can be rehearsed. Innocence can wear a mask as easily as guilt. He faced them fully. But now the game begins. I know someone here fears what I will find next, and I promise you, Hercule Poirot always finds it. A tense quiet followed Poirot's final words, like the stillness before a second storm. Inspector Hargreaves cleared his throat loudly in an attempt to cut through the suffocating silence. Well, that settles it then, the inspector declared, seizing the moment with premature triumph. The secretary, Miss Vivienne Marlowe, her perfume in the passage, her calmness, her prints. She did it. Vivienne's eyes widened in cold fury. Inspector, how dare you? But Hargreaves raised a hand. You had access. You knew his schedule. You could easily prepare an injection. And what motive? Vivian shot back with icy precision. Would I have to murder a man who paid me handsomely and relied on me for everything? Hargreaves shrugged. Women kill for stranger reasons. Poirot inhaled sharply, almost theatrically. Mon ami, you gallop to conclusions like a horse that has misunderstood the race. Hargreaves bristled. It's obvious, Poirot. Poirot smiled gently. The obvious, Inspector, is the enemy of truth. You must learn to mistrust it. Vivienne straightened, chin lifted. Her composure returned with the ease of someone accustomed to being underestimated. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Do not thank me yet, mademoiselle. I've not declared you innocent. Only not obvious. Hargreaves scowled. What more evidence do you need? Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, pacing with slow, thoughtful steps. I need only the evidence that will speak, and it is not yet ready. He turned sharply. But you, Inspector, are ready to arrest someone. That is your nature, eh? And so, let us test your theory. Poirot stood before Vivian, eyes narrowing, mustache bristling. Mademoiselle Marlowe, he said with crisp clarity, please tell us what Mr. Remington said to you yesterday evening. Her expression softened with memory. He dictated correspondence until a little after 9. He was in a foul mood. He dismissed me abruptly and told me to update his legal documents in the morning. Legal documents? Poirot repeated. Yes, a rewrite of portions of his will. A tremor went through the room. Lady Eleanor stiffened. Jonas Blythe leaned forward sharply. Charlotte gasped. The valet's face turned rigid. Poirot's eyes glimmered. Ah, a will. Always the ghost that haunts the living after death. Hargreaves pounced. So, motive. She wanted the changes in her favor. Vivian rolled her eyes. Inspector, pray tell, how would altering Mr. Remington's will after he is dead benefit me? Secretaries do not inherit fortunes. Hargreaves faltered. Poirot chuckled softly. You see, my friend, your theory is like a souffle that collapses when struck with the spoon of logic. Vivienne permitted herself the faintest smirk. Poirot's expression sharpened. But the mention of the will does interest me, mademoiselle. Very much. Poirot moved to the window, gazing thoughtfully at the shattered elm tree and the dark earth around it. Let us pretend, he said slowly, that Miss Marlowe is the killer. Let us allow the inspector his comfort. Hargreaves squinted. What are you getting at, Poirot? Poirot turned, voice crisp. If Miss Marlowe is the killer, then she must have known of the hidden passage. She must have tracked mud from the garden. She must have smoothed the sheets, and she must have handled the syringe. He paused. Yet her fingernails are immaculate. Vivian held out her hands instantly. Her nails were indeed flawless. Buffed, polished, elegant. Poirot nodded. A woman who climbs through a dusty secret passage and crawls along old floorboards does not emerge with perfect nails, unless she cleaned them afterward. But consider this, she had no time. She was with the household from the moment the death was discovered. Hargreaves opened his mouth, closed it, then frowned deeply. And the footprints, Poirot continued. Yes, they match her shoe size. But footprints alone are not proof. Anyone may borrow shoes. The temperature in the room changed. Jonas shifted uncomfortably. Lady Eleanor looked sharply at the secretary's feet. Charlotte clasped her hands tighter. Poirot's voice dropped. Besides, the footprints were not entirely feminine. There was weight behind them. The gait was broader. He turned, meeting Hargreaves' eyes with a piercing gaze. So you see, Inspector, your obvious suspect is not so obvious after all. Hargreaves grimaced. Fine then. Who is our suspect? Poirot raised one finger theatrically. Patience. Suddenly, Charlotte Blythe spoke in a trembling whisper. I did know about the passage. All eyes turned. Charlotte seemed smaller than ever, her hands twisting the poor handkerchief into near dust. Jonas whispered, "Charlotte, what are you doing?" She shook her head, tears rising. "I must tell the truth. Monsieur Poirot was right. I could not sleep. I wandered the corridors. I hid in the passage during the storm." "Why?" Poirot asked softly. "Because—" Charlotte took a shaky breath. "Because I was terrified. The thunder, the lightning. I used to hide as a child, and the old houses always had secret places. So when I discovered the panel yesterday morning, I remembered the hiding place." Poirot observed her closely, not judging, only processing. "Did you see anyone there?" he asked. I heard footsteps." Silence crashed like thunder. "When?" Poirot pressed. "Shortly before the storm, before midnight. Someone walked the passage. Heavy steps. A man's." Jonas's face paled. Inspector Hargreaves straightened. "And then," Charlotte whispered, "I heard the door to Mr. Remington's room open and close. The room erupted. You saw. Why didn't you say—" "Charlotte!" Poirot raised a single hand. Silence returned instantly. "Continue, mademoiselle." Charlotte wiped tears. I thought it was Alistair himself. He sometimes used these old passages. I thought it was nothing, but now—" Her voice trailed off. Poirot nodded slowly. "Merci, mademoiselle. That is very helpful." Inspector Hargreaves rubbed his chin. "So the footsteps were a man's. That rules out Miss Marlowe." Poirot nodded. "Indeed." "So we return to Jonas Blythe, or the valet," Hargreaves concluded triumphantly. "Both were outside. Both lied." Poirot sighed dramatically. "Inspector, you still do not understand." Hargreaves blinked. "What?" Poirot faced the room. "The first person we must eliminate is always the one who seems guilty first. The one the clues point to with too much enthusiasm. That person is almost never the killer." He spread his hands. "And now that we have eliminated Miss Marlowe, we must pursue the false lead to the end." He paused, allowing the words to settle like dust. "Which means, my friends, the murderer wanted us to suspect her, deliberately." Vivienne's breath caught. Lady Eleanor gasped. Jonas muttered a curse. Poirot stepped forward, eyes blazing with certainty. "This is not a crime of passion. It is a crime of planning." The room shivered. "The false lead," Poirot finished softly, "was created with precision." Hercule Poirot believed deeply, almost religiously, that psychology was the true battlefield of murder. Not footprints, not fingerprints, not the clumsy mechanics of crime. No, a killer always reveals themselves in the mind long before they reveal themselves in action. And now, after the first false lead had crumbled exactly as Poirot expected, it was time to engage the suspects where they were most vulnerable, in their emotions, in their guilt, in their fear. Poirot tapped the arm of his chair lightly, like a conductor preparing a symphony. "Mes amis," he said softly, "I have one question. It is simple, oui? Utterly simple." Inspector Hargreaves muttered, "Nothing is simple with you, Poirot." Poirot smiled. "Perhaps not, but this question is." He looked at each of them, slowly, deliberately, letting silence coil around them like a tightening rope. "Who among you feared Alistair Remington the most?" A sharp intake of breath, a twitch of a hand, a flicker of the eyes. 5 subtle reactions, and each one a confession of sorts. Poirot observed every micro-expression. "Fear," he continued, "is a powerful motive, sometimes more powerful than hatred. A fearful person does not strike impulsively. Oh no. A fearful person plans carefully. Silence becomes their ally. Storms become their accomplice. Footsteps become their whispered prayers." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "I wish to hear what each of you feared about Monsieur Remington." Lady Eleanor Remington closed her eyes briefly before speaking. Her voice was low, brittle but honest in a way that surprised even Poirot. Alistair, she hesitated. He had a temper. Not violent but cruel, a cutting tongue, a coldness that could turn a room icy in moments. He controlled everything, everything. My family connections, my allowance, my movements, even the letters I received. She swallowed, hands tightening on her lap. I feared him, Monsieur Poirot. But I also pitied him, and I wanted, desperately, to avoid provoking him. Poirot nodded. Merci, madame. You have spoken with courage. But inside, Poirot filed her answer under. Truth mixed with concealment, because pity and fear rarely occupy the same heart without a deeper conflict beneath them. Jonas sat forward, jaw clenched, voice harsh. I feared him because he could ruin me. He threatened my position in the company. We built our empire together, but he wanted it all. He threatened to cut me out of a lucrative deal. I stood to lose everything. Poirot raised an eyebrow. And so you feared financial ruin? Jonas nodded curtly. Is that all? Poirot asked casually. Jonas blinked. What do you mean, is that all? Poirot inspected his fingernails with exaggerated calm. Ruin comes in many forms, monsieur. Some fear poverty, others fear humiliation, others fear secrets. Jonas stiffened visibly. Poirot smiled without warmth. Oui, we shall return to you. Charlotte Blythe wrung her hands with tremors that seemed to shake her entire body. I feared him because he reminded me of my father, she whispered. A man of booming voice and terrible moods. I cannot bear shouting. I become smaller. Poirot softened. And did Monsieur Remington shout? Often. Her voice cracked. He terrified me. I could barely speak in his presence. Poirot nodded kindly. Thank you, mademoiselle. This fear is genuine. And yet, he thought, genuine fear does not equate to murder. It paralyzes. But sometimes terror sparks desperate action. Graham Huxley stood straighter than ever, but Poirot noticed the way his jaw tensed, the slight twitch at his temple. Speak, Monsieur Huxley. I feared him because he demanded perfection, the valet answered quickly. Too quickly. He dismissed staff without hesitation. One small error, and you were gone. I could not afford to lose my position. Poirot tilted his head. But is that all? You fear unemployment? Huxley swallowed. Yes, of course. Poirot's voice became silk wrapped around steel. And nothing else? Nothing more personal? No secret he held over you? Huxley's composure cracked. Just a hairline fracture. But Poirot saw it. He always saw it. Finally, Poirot turned to Vivienne Marlowe. Mademoiselle, what did you fear? She met his gaze levelly, almost defiantly. I feared nothing. A murmur rippled through the room. Poirot smiled. Ah, such confidence. Vivienne did not blink. I respected him. I disliked him at times. But fear? No. Poirot leaned forward, eyes twinkling mischievously. A woman who claims to fear nothing is either extraordinarily brave or extraordinarily practiced in hiding fear. Vivienne's mask slipped for the briefest moment, revealing a flicker of something. A shadow, a memory, a threat. Poirot saw it, but she recovered swiftly. I hide nothing, she said coolly. Poirot did not respond. He had already seen enough. Poirot rose and walked to the center of the room, tapping his polished shoe lightly against the floor. Now, he said softly, I shall ask another question. This one is even simpler. Everyone leaned in. Who among you visited Monsieur Remington's room earlier than you have claimed? Silence. Powerful, suffocating silence. No one spoke. Poirot nodded. Then allow me to rephrase. His voice sharpened. Who among you touched something in that room after he was dead? A tremor through the group. Still no answer. Poirot's eyes glittered. Very well. I shall tell you. He raised one finger. It was someone who could not resist order. Someone who cannot see a disarranged cushion or wrinkled sheet without smoothing it. Someone whose instinct to tidy is greater than their instinct to conceal. He turned, slowly, until his gaze fixed on the person whose eyes were widening with dread. But he did not yet speak the name. Not yet. Instead, he asked the question that would shatter composure. Tell me, monsieur, why did you smooth the sheets on the dead man's bed? The person flinched. Someone gasped. Poirot smiled softly. The psychological game, mes amis, has begun. The drawing room fell into a suspended silence, each suspect frozen in place as Poirot's question hovered like a blade above the room. Why did you smooth the sheets on the dead man's bed? It was an accusation disguised as an inquiry, and it struck with the precision of one of Poirot's famed little grey cells. A faint tremor ran through Graham Huxley, the valet, barely noticeable, but to Poirot it might as well have been a confession. Before anyone could speak, Graham stammered, I did nothing of the sort. Poirot raised a hand. Not yet. We shall return to you. But fate, as it often does in Poirot's cases, interrupted the moment. Because at that exact instant, a scream shattered the calm, sharp, agonized, unmistakably real. It came from the upper corridor. Charlotte Blythe's voice cried out, "Help! Someone, please!" Jonas leapt up. Lady Eleanor gasped. Hargreaves surged toward the door. Poirot, already moving, muttered, "Voilà! The killer grows nervous." They raced up the sweeping staircase. Poirot surprisingly quick despite his polished shoes and meticulous stride. Charlotte stood trembling in the hallway, hand pressed to her mouth, pointing to a small side room. There, inside. He's hurt. Oh, heavens. Inspector Hargreaves shoved the door open. Inside lay a man sprawled on the floor unconscious, blood trickling from a wound at the back of his head. It was Jonas Blythe. Lady Eleanor gasped, hand pressed to her heart. Vivian swore under her breath. Hargreaves knelt beside Jonas. He's alive. Someone struck him hard. Poirot surveyed the room carefully. It was a small archival chamber, lined with old ledgers and dusty business documents. Jonas lay beside a tall filing cabinet, its drawers partially open. Poirot tilted his head. "Inspector, observe the cabinet." Hargreaves frowned. "What about it?" Poirot pointed. "The fourth drawer is open. Monsieur Jonas Blythe was searching for something." Vivian whispered, "His company files." Poirot nodded slowly, and our attacker did not want him finding whatever he came for. Hargreaves muttered, "Could have been a thief." Poirot raised his brows. "A thief in a locked manor with murder afoot." "Non, mon ami. The person who struck Jonas Blythe was already inside this house." Lady Eleanor shivered. "But why attack Jonas?" Poirot turned toward her, expression sharp and calculating. "Because Jonas Blythe knows something. He went searching for the truth, and the truth struck back." Poirot approached Charlotte gently, for she trembled as though she'd touched lightning itself. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "you found him." Charlotte nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. Yes. I came up to fetch my shawl. I saw the door open, heard a thump, and when I looked inside, he was there. I thought he was dead." Poirot studied her face with surgical precision. "And you saw no one leaving the room?" "No, no one," she insisted. "I only heard footsteps." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Footsteps? Which direction?" Charlotte hesitated. I think toward the West Wing." Poirot exchanged a look with Inspector Hargreaves. The West Wing. The same area as the secret passage. The same area as Remington's room. The same area where lies filled the air like dust. Poirot murmured, "Someone followed Jonas. Someone feared what he might discover." Poirot stepped inside the archival room, careful not to disturb anything. He crouched by the cabinet drawers. Dust, thick, untouched, covered most of the upper drawers, but not the lower ones. The bottom three had finger-shaped clean streaks where someone had pulled multiple drawers recently. Poirot spoke aloud, mostly to himself. 3 drawers, 3 opportunities. But what was he looking for? He opened the 4th drawer gingerly. Inside were folders marked with dates and company names. Many were missing. Those remaining were disordered, an offense Poirot took personally. He removed a single paper left behind. It was torn, a corner fragment only. Inspector Hargreaves peered over his shoulder. "What is that?" Poirot held it delicately. "A piece of a legal document. Specifically," he angled it toward the light, "the addendum of a will." Lady Eleanor stiffened. Vivienne inhaled sharply. Poirot turned, voice low and dangerous. Jonas Blythe was not looking for business papers. He was looking for a will Monsieur Remington wished to revise. Hargreaves frowned. But why would Jonas risk sneaking around to find that? Poirot looked at the unconscious man on the floor. "Because, Inspector, whatever change Monsieur Remington intended was very unfavorable to Jonas Blythe." Poirot examined the room further. The window was closed, but the latch bore fresh scratches. The curtains moved slightly, as if recently disturbed. Poirot whispered, "Someone stood here, waiting. Someone struck from behind and fled." He noticed something on the floor beside Jonas's hand, a small object. Poirot bent down, picking it up gently. It was a cufflink. Simple in design. Silver. Poirot held it aloft. "Inspector Hargreaves, this does not belong to Monsieur Blythe," Lady Eleanor gasped. Charlotte covered her mouth. Hargreaves narrowed his eyes. "Then who?" Poirot turned the cufflink over, revealing a tiny engraved monogram. "H.R." Lady Eleanor whispered. "Hector Remington, Alistair's father." Poirot nodded. "A family heirloom." He faced them all. "And only one man in this house wears his late master's cufflinks." Silence. One pair of eyes widened in terror. Poirot said the name softly, without cruelty. "Graham Huxley." Graham's face drained of color. I didn't drop that," he stammered. "Someone planted it." Poirot stepped closer. "Planted? In a locked house? In a room only staff and family can access? A room Jonas entered searching for the will?" He tilted his head, voice soft but relentless. "You entered the passage last night. Your boots were muddy. You smoothed the sheets on the dead man's bed. And now you're cufflink at the scene of an attack." Huxley backed away step by step. Inspector Hargreaves advanced on him. "What were you trying to stop Jonas from finding?" Graham shook his head violently. No, I swear. Listen to me. I didn't kill Mr. Remington. I only..." Poirot lifted a finger. The room froze. "Only what, monsieur?" Graham swallowed. His voice cracked. "I only moved the body." A stunned silence exploded. Lady Eleanor reeled. Charlotte gasped. Vivienne's composure shattered. Inspector Hargreaves thundered, "You what?" Huxley's voice trembled as he spoke. "I didn't kill him, but I found him dead, earlier than everyone thinks. And I tidied the bed. I straightened the sheets. I know it was wrong, but I panicked." Poirot nodded slowly, not triumphant, only thoughtful. "As I suspected." Hargreaves roared. "Why hide the body's true time of death?" Graham's eyes filled with tears. "Because if they knew he died earlier, I'd be the first suspect. I'm always the first suspect." Poirot looked at him gently, but his mind was already racing. "And why?" Poirot asked quietly. "Did you sneak into the passage last night?" Graham looked away. "Because I wasn't the only one who visited Mr. Remington's room before the storm. Someone else was there." Poirot's voice softened to a razor's whisper. "Who, monsieur?" Graham hesitated. Poirot stepped forward. "Tell me the truth." Graham swallowed. It was... His voice cracked. It was Lady Eleanor. For a heartbeat, the entire house seemed to stop breathing. Lady Eleanor's eyes widened, not in theatrical shock, but in something deeper, raw. Fear, betrayal, or outrage that her name had finally left someone else's lips. Graham Huxley, the valet, stood trembling, cornered by truth and desperation. Inspector Hargreaves advanced on him. "You saw Lady Eleanor in Remington's room. Speak clearly, man." Graham's voice quivered. "Yes, but not how you think. It wasn't during the storm, it was earlier. Much earlier, before midnight." Lady Eleanor staggered backward, steadying herself on a chair. "This is absurd. I was nowhere near my husband's room." Poirot's eyes glittered, not with accusation, but with keen observation. "You deny entering the secret passage, madame." Her voice cracked. "I didn't even know it existed." Poirot raised his hand gently, the gesture of a maestro calming an orchestra before the crescendo. "Let us all breathe, then let us examine the truth with order." Graham continued wringing his hands. "I went to check on the master earlier than usual. He had rung for me around 9:40. When I approached the door, I heard voices, his and Lady Eleanor's." Lady Eleanor stiffened. Charlotte covered her mouth. Vivian blinked. Jonas, still weak from the blow to his head, whispered, "Impossible." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "You overheard, yes? What did they say?" Graham swallowed. He accused her of lying about her past, about someone she had been corresponding with." Lady Eleanor gasped sharply. "This is preposterous. A private marital argument. True, but I left immediately. He dismissed me." Poirot nodded gently. "And yet, madame, that is not the part that interests me." He turned back to Graham. "You saw her in the passage?" "Yes," the valet said, trembling. "Around 11. She was pacing, upset. She looked lost." Lady Eleanor shook her head vigorously. "No, I never left my room." Poirot raised a single eyebrow. "Are you certain of that, madame?" Her silence was answer enough. Poirot motioned for them all to follow him back to the west wing. The air hung thick with tension as he slid open the hidden panel once more. The narrow passage yawned before them, dark, dusty, claustrophobic. Poirot gestured. "Observe, mes amis. The dust tells a story. 2 people passed through here last night. One heavier, one lighter. The heavier stepped cautiously, weight on the heels. The lighter, quicker, uneven, as if pacing." He turned to Lady Eleanor. "The lighter footprints match your size, madame." She looked down as if the floor itself were accusing her. Poirot softened his voice. "Why did you hide this from us?" Lady Eleanor's breath trembled. Because he frightened me. I needed to clear my head. I wandered the corridor and saw the panel slightly ajar. I went inside for a moment. I swear I never entered his room again." Poirot nodded thoughtfully, too thoughtfully. Jonas muttered, "She's lying." Vivian murmured, "Or hiding something." Keen as he was, Poirot raised his hand again. "No, she tells the truth about her fear. But something else is missing. Something she hides still." Poirot's attention drifted back to the archival room, the scene of Jonas's attack. He had collected the torn corner of the document earlier, but now he returned to the room with purpose. The others followed, tension thick in the air. Poirot approached the large desk in the middle of the room. Mahogany, old, sturdy. He tested the drawers. Most slid open easily. But one, third from the top, was locked. Poirot leaned closer. "Inspector, have you a key?" Hargreaves shook his head. "Not to this. Part of Remington's private archive." Poirot's mustache twitched with satisfaction. "Then we must improvise with delicacy." Vivian stepped forward. "I know the combination." Every head turned sharply. Poirot smiled faintly. As I suspected. Vivian flushed. Mr. Remington trusted me with many things, this drawer included. Poirot stepped aside. Mademoiselle, proceed. Vivian unlocked the drawer with swift, practiced movements. The drawer slid open. Inside were letters, a stack of them, neatly tied with a blue silk ribbon. Poirot lifted them carefully. He read the top letter's salutation. Ma chère Eleanor. Lady Eleanor froze. Charlotte gasped. Jonas muttered something under his breath. Hargreaves' jaw dropped. Poirot turned, eyes piercing. These letters are not written by Lady Eleanor. They are to her, from someone named R. Lady Eleanor's face turned the color of bone. No, please, Monsieur Poirot, they are harmless, private, personal. Poirot raised a finger. And the same ribbon used to bind these letters matches the fiber I found in the secret passageway. Vivienne whispered, so she was in the passage with those letters. Poirot nodded. Oui. He untied one letter and scanned a line. Jonas shouted, read it aloud. Lady Eleanor cried out, no. But it was too late. Poirot read gently, my darling Eleanor, he grows suspicious. I fear he may discover our secret. You must be cautious. If he finds our correspondence, he will ruin us both. Ah. Silence thundered through the room. Hargreaves all but exploded. An affair. She was having an affair. Lady Eleanor's knees nearly gave way. Please, you do not understand. It wasn't what it seems. Poirot spoke softly. No, madame. It was not an affair of the heart. He lifted another letter. R was a lawyer. A friend? A confidant? Someone helping you escape your husband? Lady Eleanor looked up in stunned relief mixed with shame. Yes, she whispered. He was helping me prepare a legal separation. Alistair would have destroyed me if he found out. Poirot nodded slowly. And he did find out. That is why you argued. That is why he threatened you. Vivienne put a hand over her mouth. He was going to cut you out of the will. Jonas swore. So that's why she was in the passage, hiding the letters. Lady Eleanor shook her head desperately. I didn't kill him. I only hid the letters. I swear on my life. Poirot's expression softened, but only slightly. I believe you, madame. You did not kill your husband. You merely feared him, and fear breeds secrecy, not murder. He placed the letters down. But now that the truth is known, the real motive begins to reveal itself. Poirot walked back to Remington's bedroom one final time. He stood over the bed. He inhaled deeply. Then he plucked something from the carpet, a single, nearly invisible sliver of glass. He held it up to the light. Vivienne whispered, "What is it?" Poirot's voice was quiet, lethal, certain. A broken piece of an ampoule, a vial for injectable poison. Someone dropped it. Silence. Poirot turned the glass over between his fingers. This is my hidden clue. The one detail the killer thought too small to matter. He looked at them all. It tells me two things. The poison was administered by injection. The killer is someone who handles glass frequently and was careless enough to break it. Charlotte stammered. Who handles glass? Poirot did not answer. Not yet. He slipped the shard into an envelope. And now, he said softly, the storm inside this house grows louder than the one outside. He closed the envelope. It is time for Hercule Poirot to set the final trap. Evening descended over Highthorn Estate like a velvet curtain, quiet, heavy, suffocating. The earlier storm had blown itself out, leaving behind a stillness so complete that every footstep echoed, every whispered breath carried through the halls. It was the perfect backdrop for what Hercule Poirot required. A gathering, a truth, a reckoning. Poirot stood at the center of the grand drawing room, the fire cracking softly behind him. Inspector Hargreaves stood nearby, arms crossed but eyes sharp. The suspects formed a semicircle before Poirot, each wearing the strain of guilt, fear, or the gnawing uncertainty of innocence. Lady Eleanor sat stiffly, clutching a handkerchief. Jonas Blythe nursed a bandage on his head. Vivian Marlowe remained coolly rigid. Charlotte Blythe trembled. Graham Huxley, the valet, stared at the carpet as though awaiting execution. Poirot lifted a hand. "Mes amis," he began with gentle gravity, "murder is a mirror. When one looks into it, one sees not only the killer, but the truth of all who stand nearby." He paused. "And now, it is time for each of you to look." Poirot paced slowly, hands clasped behind him. "Let us begin with what we know. Monsieur Remington was murdered not during the storm, but before, silently, efficiently, with a needle." He gestured to the envelope containing the glass shard. "The ampule was broken by accident, a careless moment, in an otherwise careful plan." Jonas muttered, "So who, Poirot? Who would use such a method?" Poirot raised one finger. "There are three categories of motive present in this house." He turned to Lady Eleanor. "First, fear, the fear of a tyrannical husband, the fear of exposure. Lady Eleanor hid letters in the passage, yes, but she did not kill him, because fear makes one flee, not murder." Lady Eleanor exhaled shakily, tears appearing in her eyes. Poirot turned to Jonas. "Second, greed. Monsieur Jonas Blythe, who feared financial ruin if Remington altered the will. And yet, he is innocent of murder. His panic earlier today proves his actions were driven by desperation, not assassination." Jonas blinked, stunned. You believe me?" Poirot nodded. "For now." He turned slowly toward Vivienne. "Third, opportunity. Mademoiselle Marlowe had access to Remington's documents, to his schedule, to his medicines. But she is not the killer." Hargreaves sputtered. "What? But she—" Poirot raised a hand. "Inspector, she feared nothing, and when one fears nothing, one does not kill secretly. Also, her nails, her shoes, her perfume in the passage. These were all planted. Deliberately." Vivienne's jaw tightened. "Someone tried to frame me." Poirot nodded. "Exactement." Poirot stepped toward the fireplace, its flames reflecting in his sharp eyes. "There were 4 lies told today, 4 untruths that reveal the murderer more clearly than fingerprints." He raised his hand, ticking them off one by one. Lie number 1. Mademoiselle Charlotte did not simply hide from thunder. She wandered because she heard something, someone in the passage. She feared telling the truth because she recognized the footsteps. Charlotte flinched. Poirot gave her a gentle look. "Courage, mademoiselle. You are not the criminal." Lie number 2. Monsieur Jonas claimed he searched for business papers. No, he searched for the will. Someone told him it existed. Someone wanted him to find the wrong documents. A misdirection. Jonas frowned deeply. "Who would mislead me?" Poirot smiled faintly. "All in good time." Lie number 3. Monsieur Huxley claimed he smoothed the sheets out of panic. That is partly true. But panic does not erase the fact that he hid the body's true time of death on purpose. Huxley tensed. Poirot continued. "But he did not kill his master. He is guilty only of foolishness." Huxley's knees nearly buckled in relief. Lie number 4. Poirot turned slowly, very slowly, toward the last person who had not yet been directly confronted. Mademoiselle Vivienne Marlowe claimed she feared nothing. Vivienne met his gaze. "I don't." Poirot shook his head. "That, mademoiselle, was the greatest lie of them all." Vivienne's face hardened. "I don't know what you think you found, Poirot." Poirot interrupted softly. "I found the truth in your hands." Vivienne froze. Poirot stepped closer. "You handle glass daily. Beakers, vials, ink bottles. You break them often. You keep a small kit in your desk for handling shards. Your fingers show tiny nicks that are fresh from last night. Vivian instinctively curled her hands into fists. The room held its breath. Poirot spoke gently. I found the glass shard beside Remington's bed. It was from a medical ampoule, the kind found in the secretary's supplies, used for sealing fountain pens and cleaning delicate instruments. Vivian's eyes sharpened. Just a fraction. Poirot pressed on. Someone had to know how to inject poison swiftly, quietly, and without spilling a trace. Someone accustomed to precision. He leaned in. Someone like you. Vivian's voice was ice. This is speculation. Poirot smiled softly. No, mademoiselle. Now comes the evidence. Poirot lifted a small triangular scrap of paper, the one torn from the will. This piece was torn, not cut. The edges are ragged. He held up another sheet, one of Vivian's typed notes, and these ragged edges match perfectly the tear pattern from the secretary's desk blotter. Vivian's eyes widened. Poirot continued, You tore the will yourself. You removed the new clauses. You attempted to destroy them. But Jonas discovered the missing entries and came searching. Hargreaves shouted, Why tear the will at all? Poirot answered, Because the will named Vivian Marlowe as a beneficiary. The room gasped. Jonas swore. Lady Eleanor's face went pale. Vivian's mask cracked. Poirot nodded. Oui. Remington intended to leave a significant sum to his secretary. Perhaps admiration, perhaps manipulation. But the new will also remove Jonas and threatened the financial stability of the entire estate. Poirot paused. But Vivian did not want to be named. She feared what others would think. She feared Lady Eleanor discovering it. She feared Jonas, who would see her as a rival. And most of all, she feared what Remington would demand in return. Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. He owed me. He promised me freedom from debt. He said he would pay for my mother's care. Poirot softened briefly. Ah, so it began as desperation. Vivian blinked, tears forming, but her expression hardened again quickly. Poirot's voice became steel, and desperation became murder when he threatened to change the will again. Vivian's breath hitched. Poirot stepped back. You killed him before midnight. You smoothed the sheets. You planted your perfume in the passage. You broke the ampoule, and when Jonas searched for the truth, you struck him from behind. Silence thundered. Poirot took a breath. And now, mademoiselle, the time has come. He pointed at her gently. You, Vivian Marlowe, are the murderer of Alistair Remington. Vivian's face twisted, not in denial, but in the terrible realization that Poirot had followed her every step. For a moment, a single, fragile moment, Vivian Marlowe stood motionless, as if the world had suddenly grown too heavy for her slender frame to bear. Her poise, once elegant and untouchable, now quivered like porcelain under a hammer's shadow. Inspector Hargreaves stepped forward, hand hovering near his cuffs. Miss Marlowe, you are under arrest. But Poirot lifted a hand. No, Inspector, you must allow her to speak. Vivian's eyes met Poirot's. They were no longer cold, no longer calculating. They were defeated. But not entirely. Vivian inhaled deeply. I suppose it is pointless to deny it now, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot bowed his head slightly. The truth, mademoiselle, is never pointless. She exhaled, a long, shuddering release. Yes, I killed him, but I want you all to understand why. Lady Eleanor turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. Jonas folded his arms, jaw tight. Charlotte watched with horrified fascination. Graham Huxley simply closed his eyes. Vivian continued. He was going to ruin me. He had promised to help me with my mother's medical expenses. He offered financial security in exchange for loyalty, for silence, for obedience. Her voice tightened. But when I refused to become his possession, he grew furious. He told me he would rewrite the will again, remove my mother's support entirely, and make certain no other employer would touch me. Poirot nodded gently. A man of power can be cruel when he feels rejected. Vivienne's voice cracked. I confronted him last night. He mocked me, said I was naive if I ever believed he would help without taking something in return. He told me I would never escape him. Never. She wiped her eyes, shaking. And then he added, something worse. He said he was also removing Jonas and giving everything to a charity foundation, that all of us were replaceable. Jonas flinched. Vivienne's voice turned cold. It was not jealousy or greed or ambition. It was survival. I could not let him destroy my life. Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle but unwavering. And so, mademoiselle, you took the syringe. Vivienne nodded, staring into the distance. Yes. I had prepared one earlier. Morphine diluted, enough to mimic a heart failure, silent and quick. I knew he took sleeping draughts. I knew he would not suspect a needle prick. Poirot added softly, and you timed it before the storm, knowing the thunder would mask any small noise or movement. Vivienne closed her eyes. Yes. Poirot turned to the room, addressing them all. She entered through the secret passage. Its entrance near her room made it convenient. She could watch, listen, and approach unseen. Charlotte gasped softly. She was. The footsteps I heard? Poirot nodded. Oui, Mademoiselle Charlotte. Miss Marlowe entered the passage with confidence. She delivered the injection while Remington slept, drugged by his tonic earlier in the night. He did not stir. It was silent, almost peaceful. Lady Eleanor sobbed quietly into her handkerchief. Poirot continued. Then Mademoiselle smoothed the sheets. A habit, perhaps unconscious. Her desire for order betrayed her. Vivienne whispered, I didn't want it to look like murder. I only wanted them to believe he died naturally. Poirot's eyes were kind. But murder, mademoiselle, is never neat. Never orderly. Poirot listed them, each in turn. The perfume in the passage, deliberately brushed against the panel to mislead. The footprints. Vivienne wore Charlotte's shoes briefly, knowing someone might check. Charlotte gasped. My shoes? Poirot nodded. The timing. She pretended to sleep through the worst thunder, ensuring she remained inconspicuous. The glass shard. The one mistake she made. She broke the ampule and panicked. Jonas's attack. She followed him, fearing he found the torn will. She struck him with a brass paperweight. Jonas clenched his fists. You nearly killed me. I panicked, Vivienne whispered. Poirot stepped back into the firelight, his silhouette sharp against the flickering glow. There remained only one question. Who benefits? He looked at them each. Lady Eleanor? No. The will was destroying her life, not aiding it. Jonas? None. His desperate search for the will proves ignorance, not guilt. Charlotte? No. Fearful hearts do not plot so cleverly. Graham Huxley? No. A valet does not drop a cufflink he cherishes. And finally, Poirot faced Vivienne Marlowe. You alone had motive, means, opportunity, knowledge, and a reason to hide the true time of death. Vivienne lowered her gaze. Then yes, she whispered. I killed him. Inspector Hargreaves stepped forward, cuffs ready. Vivienne Marlowe, you will stand trial for the murder of Alistair Remington. Vivienne did not resist. Her voice shook only once. At least my mother will not know. Poirot bowed his head slightly. You acted out of desperation, mademoiselle, not malice. The courts will see that. She nodded faintly as she was led away. The remaining suspects stood in heavy silence, relieved, grief-stricken, ashamed, all at once. Lady Eleanor whispered, "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot," Jonas muttered. "A hell of a mess." Charlotte dabbed her eyes, trembling. Graham exhaled shakily, as though freed from a nightmare. Poirot simply adjusted his cuffs. Later that night, as the household collapsed into uneasy quiet, Poirot stood by the broken elm tree outside. Moonlight reflected off his immaculate shoes. The air smelled of wet earth and the fading echo of thunder. Hargreaves joined him. "I'll never understand how you saw it before any of us." Poirot smiled. "Because, mon ami, I did not look at the crime." He touched his temple. "I looked at the mind that committed it." Hargreaves frowned. "Still seems impossible." Poirot chuckled softly. "Impossible? No, merely psychological." The inspector sighed. "Will you ever write a book on how you do it?" Poirot lifted his chin with vanity and amusement. "Ah, but then everyone would know the secrets of Hercule Poirot. And where, Inspector, would be the fun in that?" A breeze stirred the trees. Poirot straightened his coat. "It is always the same, you know. Storms outside may frighten, but the storms within the human heart," he sighed, "those are far more dangerous." Hargreaves nodded. "And you calmed this one." "Not calmed," Poirot corrected softly. "Only understood." He turned toward the estate, lights dimming in distant windows. "And now, mon ami, let us take our leave. Murder makes poor company after midnight." Poirot stepped into the night, his silhouette dignified, precise, unmistakable. A man who had once again restored order in a world too often tangled by chaos.